Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is August 17th, 2021, and today's guest is Mark Kenyon from Wired to Hunt. All right, welcome back to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and today's episode is 174, and today's guest is a familiar voice if you are familiar with outdoor hunting podcasts, and I'm talking about from the beginning. Today's guest is Mark Kenyon from the Wired to Hunt podcast, and Mark is, one of the OGs, one of the pavers, if you will. He paved the way for a lot of these outdoor podcasts back when podcasts weren't even really a thing, before people knew anything about them. So that's today's guest. We have an awesome episode. I can't wait for all you guys to listen to this one. It's really cool. We talk about prep, in the summer, but also how Mark has transitioned from what he used to do to what he does now with just maybe a little lack of time, being a dad of two now, and how he's adapted his hunting style to still be able to get out in the woods and be efficient as well. We also get into hunting the first 2 weeks of October, so it's really cool. He breaks down how he does it, and I think there's some really cool insight in this one. So, yeah, I'm super excited about this one. Like I said, I've looked up to Mark for a long time. He's done a lot for, the people, and myself included, that have a podcast in the outdoor space. So I just want to tell him thank you for doing that and paving the way. So with that being said, I want to send out a shout out to the working class bow hunter guys, Kurt, Doug, Austin, Eric, Ross, all those guys over there. If you guys are wanting some more content and some awesome content, and you don't know much about working class bow hunter, go check out their podcast. They do an awesome podcast. It's Working Class Bow Hunter Podcast. Down dirty, nitty gritty. They push the envelope, and I love it because I don't think it could be, duplicated or done again. These guys have a niche, and speaking of OGs, these guys are one of the OGs along with Mark. They've been doing it a long time, so go check them out as well. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody out there for all the downloads and all the support, and I want to get over to this interview with Mark, so here it is. All right, welcome back to the Fall Podcast. And today's guest, I have a familiar voice on. If you guys are familiar with outdoor podcasts, it's Mark Kenyon from Wired to Hunt. Mark, thanks for coming on again, man.
Hey, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad we could carve out some time here to talk about some whitetail prep. We're in August right now. We're getting ready to get into the Super Bowl of everything that we do, and I'm super pumped about it. I know you probably are, so I'm excited to pick your brain today.
Yeah, I'm chomping at the bit. The rising anticipation is nearing its peak, and
yes.
I take off for my first hunt of the season here in about 2 weeks will be when I will leave to start heading out. So it's going to be any time now, and I'm stoked. I'm excited, a little anxious, everything in between.
So I guess the big question is do you have everything ready to go? Like right now, or are you on panic mode, like trying to cram everything in?
I've never once, any season in my entire life, have I ever got to the end or got to the beginning of the season and felt like I had everything ready to go. But I think what having kids has done for me has allowed myself to forgive myself for not having everything ready. I guess I've had to adjust my expectations of what's actually realistic. And then also I've moved away, kind of out of necessity. I've moved away from having a million things done in the preseason that are like set for this situation, set for this situation, and set for this situation. And I've instead moved more and more towards a hunting style that allows me to, you need to have some stuff figured out preseason, but I do a lot on the fly now. Okay. A lot of my hunting prep is maybe done just between my two ears, and I'm just scouting, with e-scouting, and maybe do some on the ground stuff, but then it's hunting season, figuring out what's happening right now, adjusting right now, setting up a saddle right now. So that has kind of that has been a necessity because I just don't have as much time as I used to now that I'm, chasing two kids around all the time and all the other responsibilities that come with family and work, and just
Sure.
like everybody else, right?
Yep.
So that's been like an evolution for me from 13 years ago when I was single and just off on my own. I could spend every day of the year doing stuff. Now I need to be a lot more efficient with my time.
Yep.
So I got stuff to do still, but most of the big projects that I did want to do are done, and now it's mostly just keeping my archery up to speed and feeling good about that, and jumping in with both feet.
Yeah, and it's funny to hear you say that because I've kind of made that transition as well, about the same as you have. I've got a daughter that's going to turn 4 years old, and here shortly in August. And honestly, I started morphing my hunting tactics, I guess you could say, or the way I approach things last year. I went like exclusively, more or less, run and gun. Like, take a stand in with me, take it down. Like this year, I've got two farms here in Michigan. One's big woods, one's a farm country. The big woods one, haven't even set a camera on it, haven't set a stand on it yet. My whole thing is like, I'm gonna go in October and I'm just gonna start scouting with a stand on my back and just kind of like let my woodsmanship kind of take that over. And
Yeah.
same kind of thing though. I mean, you get wrapped up in a lot of different things. You're being dad, you're being father, or father and husband and all that stuff. And yeah, it's cool to. It's like you're almost okay with, like, for me anyway, like I haven't got my fall food plots in yet, and I'm like, I feel like I need to do it, but I'm like, if it doesn't happen, I think I'm all right. Like, it's not like a
You
make
figure
or
it
break
out.
kind of. Yeah, I'll figure it out as I
Yeah.
go. So
Yes, it's an empowering feeling to kind of realize that you're not beholden to any one thing, right? I mean, I
yeah,
used to be in the same boat. Like, I had to get these six
yep,
stands prepped perfect, and I had to get these food plots in perfect, or I had to have, this permission and this permission and this thing. And if it didn't happen, oh, I'm screwed. But I think this comes with experience and time. But as you become less and less dependent on any one thing, and you develop this ability to kind of adapt, I just think it opens up so many doors when like, oh yeah, this thing goes wrong, no problem, I'll
yep,
figure it out. This thing goes wrong, no problem. Like, it makes things so much more fun,
for sure.
first off, and then I think it makes you more likely to ultimately fill tags too. But
Yeah,
there's not an easy way to get to that point. I think it just requires a lot of trial and error, and just doing the work, and then we all kind of get to a point where we're closer to that kind of effortless state at some point.
yep. No, I agree. Yeah, and that adaptability is powerful as well. Like, I feel like one of the biggest things that make whitetail hunters like really good is people that can really adapt on the fly. And if you
Yeah.
can like really hone in that skill, adapting and like moving, going, like, I feel like, in my opinion, you can be really successful.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, cool. I want to get into some prep here. My first question is for you is, you and I grew up in Michigan for, longest time now. It's a no bait state. Can't put out any mineral, can't put any bait. For these months right now, when you're getting inventory for bucks on camera, if you're trying to do that, what are some secrets that you are doing to kind of get those bucks on camera when you cannot use those supplemental feeding or the bait, that kind of stuff? Like, what are some secrets you have?
Yeah, it's definitely more tricky. No doubt about it. It's harder to get those summer pictures without a trophy rock or a pile of corn or whatever it is. And my buddies in Iowa are always sending me these pictures, or whatever state where they can do it, or Ohio. And these bucks are sitting there smiling for the camera every night, clear as day. And you don't get as many of those when you don't have those tools. But there are things you can do to help. I'd say the first thing I'm always looking at is food or water. Like, what's the most attractive summer food source around right now? I want to be as close as I possibly can, maybe even right on it if I can be. So in a lot of the spots I hunt, that's soybean fields. So I'm gonna have cameras on soybean fields, or as close to them as I can get, and try to put them on spots where those deer are most likely to come in and out. Right, just like hunting, you're trying to find where's the travel corridor, or where's the little pinch point, or the little feature that's just gonna funnel a little bit more of that deer movement past my camera.
Yep.
So, like an inside corner of a soybean field where it meets with a standing cornfield. That's kind of like a picture perfect kind of place that a lot of deer are going to come in and out of a bean field. That's a good place to put a summer camera. Maybe there's a fence crossing where the top two strands of barbed wire are down, and that's going to funnel more deer to cross into the bean field at that point. So you've got the draw, which is the bean field, and then you need to narrow down the stretch along the bean field to try to figure out like where are the most deer going to pass through. That's part 2. And then part 3, what I like to do with almost all of my summer cameras, if I can, is put them pointing towards a licking branch, whether it's one that was there naturally, that naturally there's a scrape happening, in the fall, previous years, or I'll just make a mock scrape. Because even though deer aren't making scrapes in August, they absolutely will still visit them and check them. So if there's a mock scrape made, or if there's a historical scrape and there's a licking branch that's still hanging over there, once you put a camera over these things, folks would be amazed to see how many deer still hit them and like visit them, smell them, rub their foreheads and their antlers up in those trees. The does come and smell them. So it's still an area of communication for deer. So that's the little tool that can then stop them in front of your camera and maybe get a deer that otherwise might have walked anywhere within a 30, 40 yard area. Now, if there's that mock scrape that every deer that passes through there wants to just get a sniff of, that draws them into your camera zone. So I think you kind of have to combine factors to get the best situation like this. So I'm next to or looking at that soybean field or clover field or whatever it is in your area, and then I'm going to try to find some kind of feature that funnels movement, inside corner, fence crossing, creek crossing, whatever, low spot in the field. And then I'm going to hopefully have some little sweetener that gets them to stop right where my camera is, which in my case is usually a mock scrape, a licking branch, something like that.
Yep.
You could also do this with like a watering hole, either something you put in yourself or find a small pond or, a little patch of lowland in some timber where there's standing water. Like those spots can also be great summer draws. Those would be the 2 types of areas that I focus 99% of my summer cameras on when I can't use any kind of attractive.
When you're doing the mock scrape thing, are you like in these months, August, September, are you putting anything in those mock scrapes? Are you roughing them up at all? Or are you just kind of, there's a licking branch here, there's more than likely been, a scrape of some sort here in the past. Are you just kind of letting the deer do their thing, or are you kind of like freshening it up with anything at all?
I absolutely freshen it up. I will rough up that ground and make it big and visual just because I want, I think, just as much as anything else, that big dirt oval on the ground that are made, by deer scraping those things, that's a visual cue. So that, especially if this is a mock scrape that I'm creating that's new, a deer's not going to necessarily notice it unless you give them a big visual stop sign that says, hey, look over here, there's a big fresh new scrape. Right. You should come check this out. And so scuffing up a big, very obvious area is particularly important at this time of year, I think, to make that happen. So I'll, if I can, I'll try to scuff up almost like a car hood sized area or like a computer desk area, like 3 foot by 4 foot or something. I'll just carve it right out. Make it so obvious that anything that's in the general area will have to swing by. And then eventually a deer will, and the deer will leave some scent, and then the next deer comes there and he smells, oh, there was a deer here, so he'll leave a scent, and then the next one, and it keeps on perpetuating.
Yep.
And then you have a natural scrape eventually. I'll usually take a pee right in it myself to kickstart a little bit of scent in there. That ammonia is basically what a deer is leaving behind when they pee in there too eventually. And a lot of studies have shown that deer don't react in a kind of negative way to that. If anything, it kind of helps just kickstart things. So I take a piss in there and then I get out and leave it alone. And I leave it alone as long as I possibly can.
Okay. I've done the same thing here in Michigan, took a pee in my scrapes, and honestly, I feel like the next day I had deer all over it. Like there's bucks in it. And really, I haven't, in my opinion, I know there's a lot of people out there talking about it. Like, does it affect deer at all? In my opinion, it hasn't affected any deer yet. So I agree with you. I did about the same thing.
Yep. I remember there was a study that came out, I don't know, excuse me, the early 2000s. I think it would have been like 2008 or 2009 when I read about it. And it compared, there's a whole series of different options and a control group. So it was like there's cameras monitoring how deer would react to a commercial lure. There was how deer would react to human urine. There was how deer would react to nothing added at all. There was all these different options. And basically what it found is that almost none of those things made a difference. Whether it was a commercial scent or the human urine, it was basically the same reaction. So since that point, I have let it fly from the tree stand. I don't care if I need to take a leak, I'm taking a leak. If I want to, just get a little something going in a scrape, I'll use my own scent.
Yep.
That's what I've always done ever since that point.
With some of those mock scrapes that, might be on field edges or something like that are in the summer, have you monitored those scrapes like throughout the fall? And do majority of them, do you see, like, are they still active throughout the fall and like, the rutting months, stuff like that? Are they still pretty active, or do they start dwindling down a little bit with the activity?
It depends. I've certainly seen examples of both. I think the biggest thing is that daylight activity changes. So you might have a decent amount of daylight activity on an edge of a bean field camera in July and August. And that's simply because, right, these deer, and bucks especially, just feel more comfortable out on those field edges in daylight in July and August. They're in bachelor groups. They're not being hunted. They're just doing their thing, right? That's why so many of us love glassing bean fields and doing all that kind of stuff, because they're about as visible as they're going to be all year. Once hunting season hits, cover starts coming down, deer behavior starts changing, hunters start entering the woods. As most of us have seen, deer activity on fields, especially mature buck activity, goes down. Now, in some places less so, but where you and I hunt in Michigan, it definitely dwindles significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So that daylight activity goes down a lot, but you'll probably still, and I think in most of my examples I can think of off the top of my head, they're still checking it out at night.
Right.
But it's just going to be different. So those back in the cover scrapes are going to be where that daylight activity starts shifting towards.
Yep, definitely. Now, with the shift that's going to happen here soon, these bucks are going to not be so bachelored up. We're getting close to October 1st. Let's talk specifically Michigan right now, but do you have a date in mind that you're like, by this day, it's usually the shift happens for you no matter what? Like, and if so, what is roughly that day?
Yeah, so it definitely is variable. Every deer is different. But the number I usually have in my head is September 7th.
Okay.
Like that first full week of September. Once that first full week of September is cleared, I'm usually pretty confident that whatever bucks are still around are going to be the ones that are going to stick around. Those summer bucks, I feel like as soon as August wraps up, their antlers harden up, the testosterone is rising. As soon as that velvet comes off, those deer seem to be, like, their behavior and their travel changes at that point. They've reached some kind of threshold where all of a sudden those bachelor groups break up. All these bucks kind of find where their home turf is going to be for the fall. For some of these bucks, they stay right there. For some of those bucks, they're relocating. I would say, anecdotally, I kind of just eyeballing what I've seen over the years, I kind of give it like a 50-50. Like about 50% of the bucks that I'm seeing in the summer stick around.
Okay.
About 50% of them move somewhere else. And that's on small properties. So I'm sure if I expanded my range that I could watch, I might be able to keep them around. But, I don't have any place that I hunt that's more than 100 acres.
Yep.
So I've got a couple places that are neighboring that I can kind of add up to a little more than 100, I guess. But, generally about half of them move off somewhere outside of that 100-acre type region.
Okay.
So, yeah, by September 7th, usually most deer have lost their velvet here in Michigan. Most of those deer have kind of pushed to their spot. And at that point, I can say, okay, this is who's here. This is who's likely going to be the deer I'll be able to hunt. And you can start thinking about, the things they start doing then are things that I care about from a hunting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What a buck's doing on August 15th, how he comes in and out of the field, or what time he came out, or whatever. It's kind of interesting, and I can learn a little bit from that, but I'm not sitting there thinking, ooh, he came out to this field edge, 4 days in a row, August 1, 3, and 6. I'm not looking at that summer behavior and really trying to extrapolate anything from that to what he'll do in October, because stuff changes so much. But once we get to September, And once I know that, okay, this deer, these 2 bucks are probably the bucks that are going to be here. So now I'm really paying attention to what they're doing, and what they're doing September 15th might impact how I try to hunt them on October 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So things really get queued up. Once September 7th hits, that's when I'm really focused on glassing to try to learn something to kill a deer. That's when, whatever the cameras are telling me matters a lot more. It shifts from just inventory to, okay, what are they doing? Because now this can help me actually hunt.
Yep.
So it's a shift in deer behavior, but it's a big shift in my behavior too.
Once that 50% leaves, quote unquote, like whatever you want it, you think it's 50%, which honestly, I can agree with that statement around me. Like, I feel like it's like cut right down the middle usually. When does that like recruitment to your property start trickling in? You know what I mean? Like bucks that you haven't been seeing, the newbies, like when do they start coming in, and do you start noticing that?
Yeah, I think it happens right around the same time. So you maybe just don't notice it for another week or two because it just takes that long for you to pick up on it. But I think that somewhere around the beginning of September is when whatever new is coming to your place shows up. For whatever reason, if I'm thinking of like a couple of the places here in Michigan that I've hunted the very most over the last decade or so, a lot of these places don't pick up new bucks. It's usually I just lose them.
Really?
I lose them in the beginning of September, and usually there's nobody new. So there might be like 4 nice bucks that I was seeing, or 3 nice bucks that I was seeing in the summer, and then September hits, and then I'm down to 1, or I'm down to 2 max. Yep. That has been the case more years than not in a lot of spots I've hunted around here. That's not the rule. I've had a few years where newbies show up, but usually the newbies that I see are like the rut. You get the random buck that shows up on Halloween and he sticks around for a little bit, or the random buck that comes through one day on the 6th and one day on the 15th, and that's it. So that's been my experience. But again, to be clear, like my experience is, southern Michigan, small properties, agriculture land where it's like 60% crops, 40% cover.
Yep.
So it's a little bit different than someone who's got 500 acres in a different kind of habitat type.
Yeah, definitely. And that's that intrigues me, because the farm country piece that I have, I would say it's even a little more. I'd say it's like 80% crop, maybe 75% crop, and the rest is there's just like wooded fence rows, little spots of woods that are just like little timber. Like you walk in like a 4-acre piece of timber and you're blowing deer out the other side. It's like that's kind of what it is. So it intrigues me that I love that kind of hunting. I've only been doing that in Michigan around here for the last probably 5 or 6 years, because I've always been like a big woods hunter, and I find it more I don't know, it gets me jacked up more, and I don't know if it's because I can see deer more, where I can see the bucks come out. I can see they're a little easier to hunt, I feel like, and it's not so much like doing an educated dart throw in like a big timber scenario, and I'm going to go here and see what happens kind of thing. But what would you say in farm country hunting, in your opinion, would be like a number one rule of thumb, like do and don't, if that makes sense? Like definitely do not do one of these things, and then, hone in on something like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So one definitely do not do thing is something that so many people do, even though it's preached all the time. And even I've been guilty of this some days, because you have days where you just get tired and lazy and like, I don't give a crap anymore. I just want to get home. So I understand this. But don't come in and out across these fields when deer are out there feeding. It's just, it's so simple. It's so kind of deer hunting 101, but it wasn't until I got, I don't know, in my 20s that I started like thinking like, oh yeah, that actually does matter. And I still have buddies that are well beyond that who still like, it's fine. But if you're trying to especially hunt a buck, 3 or 4 years or older here in Michigan, they don't tolerate a lot of crap. I've learned over the years they tolerate a little more than I used to think. I've found that you can get away with some things, but one thing you can't get away with is repeated abuse of their security. So if you come in and out crossing a a soybean field, and you're doing it at night when you're done hunting, and you walk across it, and every deer that came out to feed in it is spooked by you walking on 2 feet, and that's happening every weekend. If you don't think that's going to change deer behavior, you're way off base. So don't do that. You need to come up with a creative solution to avoid that kind of situation. You got to be able to get in and out. And in farm country, it's those fields that are the big culprits in a lot of cases.
Yep.
You got to find a way around them. So it might be taking the back way out through the timber if you've got access in a different way. If you have to get across those fields some kind of way, you've got to get creative with the mode of transportation you're taking. Best case scenario is having a friend or a wife or a whatever who would be willing to drive a truck or a ATV or something, either to you or even just drive it along the edge of the field to spook those deer so they're spooked by something else, and then you slip out somehow. If that's not an option, I do think that getting out with wheels is less offensive. So excuse me, if you can ride a bike out or something like that, that's less bad than walking out on 2 feet, obviously human. I think deer are much more used to and more forgiving of vehicles. But a 2-footed man walking is a big blinking red light. Right. Danger, danger, danger. So that's one super simple thing that if that's been a mistake you've been making, if you can fix that one thing, that will dramatically change the kind of deer activity you see. It's not always super simple, but once you find the solution, then it becomes simple. Just work until you find whatever that solution is for your situation, and then just be willing to stick to it, because usually any one of those options usually is more work than the easy option. The easy option is almost always just hop out of your stand, walk across the field back to your truck or back to your house or right. whatever. But if you can just be willing to put up with that little extra inconvenience, it's worth it. So that's one big thing to not do and to try to adjust to. One thing to really key in on, I guess, I think it would be just, and again, there's so much of this stuff, and maybe it only feels this way because I live in this world every hour of my day, yep. and so I hear the same things. And so then I become paranoid about talking about the same stuff all the time, but there's only so many fundamental truths within the world of whitetail hunting, and one of them goes back to how deer relate to fields, which is in relatively pressured areas, places where deer have learned to fear humans. Most of your daylight activity of bigger, older bucks, if that's what you're chasing after, they're going to have most of that activity happening back in the cover. So it's just super simple, but learn to get back in there a little bit. Get a little more aggressive. Don't fall for the temptation of sitting a field edge all the time, because we see it on TV all the time, right? There's lots of TV shows that showcase, successful hunts on field edges. It can happen, absolutely. And it's just more likely to happen in certain areas where there's less pressure and there's more mature bucks and there's managed properties where these deer feel more comfortable. So if you have that situation and these bucks are comfortable, then yeah, go for it. But I don't have that. A lot of other people don't have that. And so in those cases, you got to realize, all right, I don't have the thing that I see in the Outdoor Channel. That's fine. I can still kill a deer. I just need to adjust. And one of the simplest adjustments you can make when you're hunting in farm country is just get back off the field edge. Even 40 yards off
Yep.
the field edge can make a big difference. There's so many places I've hunted where I'm even where I've got a little secluded food plot that I think should be great and they should feel comfortable here, and I see all sorts of deer in the food plot and all sorts of activity and bucks and stuff, but every time there's a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old buck on the property, he's the only deer who skirts inside the edge of the cover. And if you're after that kind of deer, more often than not, when he comes through, he's going to stay in there where he feels a little bit more safe. Not that he won't make mistakes. He will. But as a deer hunter, you need to stack every odd that you can in your favor. And if that's the deer you're trying to kill, getting in there with him is going to put you more likely in his path.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, this is pretty simple stuff.
Right. Yep.
But what's I think the difference between a lot of average deer hunters and the really good ones, we all kind of know the same basic stuff. We're working with the same information. Everyone's listening to your podcast. Everyone's listening to my podcast. They're hearing the basic stuff they should do. I think the difference in many cases between those who go out and those who go out and fill their tags every year is that those people are the ones that actually execute on all this stuff.
Yep.
They actually follow through. They're actually willing to do the extra work. They're willing to go the long way around. They're willing to push in and try things and go through with it versus just saying, oh yeah, I know that this thing's important, but when it comes right down to it, they get kind of lazy on it, or they get kind of sloppy on it, or they get tempted to just sit at the edge of the field where they can see a mile, and that's fun. So that, comes down to choices and how far do you want to take it. And I think those two are very simple things, but if you can actually execute on it, there's no way it doesn't help.
I agree. And everybody that listens to, like you said, your podcast and my podcast and every podcast out there, everybody's looking for the A plus B equals C, which is a big buck. There's really none of that. It's, what works for me in Central Michigan might not work for you in Southern Michigan, or out in Iowa. So I always say you have to, take that information that we're saying, but just apply it, accordingly to your situation. And you hear John Eberhart talk about it too. He will never hunt a field edge in Michigan unless it's got secluded cover or security cover, like corn or something like that. But when he goes out of state, Kansas, Iowa, he will sit them. And I agree.
Yeah.
And you've done it too. So it's just one of those things that, like, if you see something on the Outdoor Channel of Lee Lukoski going out there and killing something over a beautiful, lush bean field, more than likely it's probably not going to happen here. Not saying it can't, but your odds are very, very low, I guess you could say.
It's different scenarios, different circumstances. And I think, my take has always been, as I've gotten to talk to all these different people for my podcast and, all these different people have listened to all these folks, I've always said that take it all in. Even if the person is hunting in a wildly different place or scenario than you, take it all in, because there's always something you can learn, but you got to pass it through that filter. And that filter should be, how does this person's circumstances compare to mine? And how do their goals compare to mine? And then as long as you can then pass that through your own lens, maybe only 2 out of the 20 ideas he shared with you actually fits your style and your circumstances, but you want to still take advantage of those 2 out of 20. At the same time, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have no filter and then take in all 20 out of 20 ideas and then assume that, oh, all of that stuff will work here. And if it doesn't work for me here, then I'm a failure because I didn't do what Lee did. No, it's not that either.
Right.
So I'd say consume and learn from everyone, but do it with a discerning eye and then test. I think one of the most important things that I've tried to do and am trying to do even more now is approach deer hunting using the scientific method. So like this stuff we learned about like biology class or chemistry or whatever back in 6th and 7th grade, this stuff applies to deer hunting, believe it or not. This is where you observe something, you have a hunch, or you hear something, someone tells you, hey, this is a thing that works. Or you're out there in the woods and you see deer do something and you say, hey, I think that means this. So you've observed something. Now you're going to make a hypothesis about it. You're going to say, okay, I think that deer will feed in food plots and I can shoot deer on food plots because I saw Lee do it. Okay, so there's your hypothesis that you got based on Lee telling you this and based on watching him on his TV show. So the problem is a lot of people stop right there. They see this thing or they observe this thing or they're told this thing and then they make their belief statement, I think that this will work, and then they just keep on doing it and doing it and doing it, thinking that it will work even if the results don't tell them that. The scientific method would tell you that you should do that, make that observation, put together, like, this is my hypothesis, this is what I think is going to work, and then you got to test it. You got to test it out and then look at the results, like, clearly and say, okay, I saw this thing that Lee's doing. I made a guess on how it might work for me. I tried it, and now I got to look at the results and see, did this thing fit into my world? Does this thing fit my circumstances or my goals or my area or the kind of deer that in my area? And test it out. Maybe test it out a couple different ways and then look and see, okay, does this work? If not, do I toss this whole idea out, or do I need to make some tweaks, or do I need to look at it a different way? And now you make a new hypothesis. You say, okay, you know what? That didn't work, but I think maybe that's because of the fact I'm not in the cover. So I'm going to shift
Yep.
30 yards into the cover, and I'm going to test it again, and I'm going to watch what the results are, and like doing that over and over and over. Observe, make an idea, watch it, test it, adjust. Like that's the process that we got to go. But it's very easy to get stuck and just keep doing the thing that you see on TV and never adjusting based on what you're seeing in real life.
Mm-hmm. When you run your test, did you see like a night and day difference right away, or was it more of like a trickle effect? Like before you started, like, oh, yeah, I can't do that, or man, that really worked. You know what I mean? Is it kind of like, is it something that you see turn over in a season, or has it been like, a couple seasons where you're like, okay, I'm starting to get this a little bit? How did that work?
I think it's definitely more trickle. It's not that there can't be some like very obvious aha moments. There can be. And if you are, I think if you are doing this explicitly, like really thinking to yourself, okay, I saw this thing, I think this thing, I'm going to try it. And then I'm really going to pay attention to how deer react to it. Like there's some ways that you can do this pretty clearly. Like, for example, I'm seeing Casey Kiefer kill bucks with a buck decoy every year in this state and that state and every place. No one ever does it in Michigan because they say it won't work. But who says it won't work? Maybe it could work. So here's something I want to test. And that's something that you can pretty clearly test it and then see with your own eyes how deer are reacting to it. If you do it enough times, enough different situations, you can say, okay, I tried it 5 different days. And in these 5 different days with these different conditions, 85% of the bucks that I saw, or 8 out of every 10 deer I saw blew out of there and made all sorts of noise, and it was a disaster. Like, that's the kind of thing where you can get a pretty clear answer to your test.
Yep.
So there are some situations like that. I think the key is to remember, like, okay, I'm testing this thing, I'm watching, I'm thinking about it, and then when I get in for the night, or when I get done my week, I'm really going to sit down and think about this. Like, okay, how did that really go? Is this worth trying again? What happened? Why did it happen? Then there's other things that just take more time to come through. Stuff like the field edge thing, like forever. Excuse me, I'm struggling here.
I'm doing the same thing.
I don't know what's going on, but when I first started like trying to target 3-year-old bucks and 4-year-old bucks, I had moved to an area of the state that was supposed to be way better for deer hunting, and I thought, oh yeah, it's going to be way better than when I grew up with hunting in northern Michigan. And so I thought I could hunt some of these field edges, and I did sit field edges, and I was seeing bucks like they were better than I'd ever seen in my whole life. And I thought, okay, this will work. It took me years though to see that there's a big difference between seeing a 3-year-old buck or seeing a 4-year-old buck and actually being able to kill one with a bow. So that was something that took some time for it to sink into me. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, oh yeah, you know what? It wasn't just, bad luck that you didn't kill that buck last year or the year after that. Maybe it's because they were always 50 yards out of range. Why were they always 50 yards out of range? Because you're sitting like a bozo in a tree in the field edge when he was back in there 50 yards into the timber, and you never adjusted to that.
Right.
So sometimes those things take a little time for the numbers to add up enough, the experiences to add up enough to have that like, oh yeah, there's a pattern here. Mm-hmm. I do think there's some things you can do to speed that process up. One of them is something that I have tried to get better at and failed over and over again. I'm going to try it again this year. But every time I do it, I'm like, oh, I need to do more of this. And that is actually record what you're seeing. So like, take notes, have a hunting journal or something, because you might think that you can remember everything in your head, and you might think that you can keep track of all this kind of stuff, but there are so many things going on in our lives.
You can't.
You can't.
No.
So what I've done in some years, I make it 3/4 of the way through the season. Some years I get a quarter of the way through the season. I've yet to do it through an entire year, but I've done partial years many times. And record what you see after every hunt. Record where you were. Record as much information as you have time to do. So the spot, the wind, the temperature, the setup, what you saw. If you did anything like this, like I tested a decoy, here's how the deer reacted, like all that kind of stuff. It's really hard to grasp any kind of like takeaway from something if you look at any day or any hunt in isolation. Like one data point, like one day's experience, it's hard to like glean an insight. But if you could set back at the end of the season and go back through your journal and see like, oh man, look at this. That's interesting. October 25th, a buck did the same kind of thing. October 30th, buck did the same kind of thing. November 1, same kind of thing. November 8th, same kind of thing. November 12th, same kind of thing. And maybe you were jumping all over the place and life was busy and you were dealing with kids and the hunts were long and you never actually saw that there was this overarching thing happening consistently. But because you were in life and life's crazy, that didn't pop out to you.
Yep.
But now when you step back and you look at the whole picture and you read the story of your whole season, those things all of a sudden stand out. And you can say, look at that. There's the test results I was looking for. Now I can adjust and learn from that. So I think that everything I'm saying here is kind of requires going from like just hunting to hunting in like a purposeful way.
Hunt with a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. Like think about this stuff afterwards. Have a purpose to not just like, there's nothing wrong with going out there and having a good time and just doing it just for that. But if you're trying to really up your game, if you're really trying to get better at this stuff and you're setting goals for yourself, and that's me. So this is the kind of stuff I think about. It maybe doesn't apply to everyone, but if that's you, I think that taking that shift to going through this whole thing in a kind of mindful way where you're taking time to think about these things, taking time to look back on what worked, what didn't, what kind of learn from these things, that whole mindset shift has been what's transformed my success, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo that because I've been, since 2012, I've been taking a journal. But it's been like the same thing as you've done. Like you get halfway through the year and it just peters out. Well, last year I said, fuck this. I am doing this. I'm doing it every day, like doing it all because I want to see those data points. Like I want to see everything. So what I ended up doing is I went in on a desktop computer and I created an Excel sheet, but in Google Sheets, and I transferred it to my phone. So then all I got to do is just like basically put in the points, like how many does did I see? How many bucks did I see? Were they quality bucks? Yada, yada, so on and so forth. And I kept every sit every day.
That's great.
And I'd even keep, like when Casey and I were going out of state and I was filming him, I would do what, in Ohio, what our day was like. And it helps me as an editor as well. Like I can go back and be like, oh, we saw the Big Ten on the 8th and almost had an opportunity. So it keeps the story good there. But I have some comparables too to like, I would monitor my cell cams back in Michigan, and I would write on those days like, hey, Michigan, bucks were moving like crazy that day.
That's awesome.
And honestly, the biggest data point that I took out of all of that was from October 19th through the 26th on my farmland Michigan farm was the hottest rut. Those 6 days I had 3 shooters that were Pope and Young or bigger that were daylighting every day. And I had like a 130 inch buck. He was with a doe for 36 hours, locked down with a doe in a wide open bean field, for 36 hours. And I'm like, holy cow, like this is good stuff. This is good to know. But for some reason the rut was hot for those 6 days in that time frame. And then I kind of go back and I look at like years prior, and it kind of matches. It's like that 20th through the 27th, you need to be in the stand. Like the bucks are showing like crazy in this area, Yeah. So it's really cool to take the data too, if you can like really hold yourself to it.
That's the trick, is holding yourself to it. But yes, I've never regretted having that stuff when I have it. I always look at it like, oh, this is like gold.
Yep. Yeah. Speaking of October, I want to transition a little bit. I want to talk about October 1st to the 15th. Now, this is something I get asked a lot, tactics and approaches to the 1st to 15th, and it plays well because we're coming into October here shortly. It's going to happen. So what is the Mark Kenyon approach to the first 2 weeks of season? I guess lay out the nitty gritty. Like, are you hunting mornings or, where are you hunting in the evenings, that kind of thing? I know it can vary. It's a very broad question, but, in a perfect world, what is your approach for those first 2 weeks?
Yeah. So this would be like what I typically do. And what I typically do is I usually look at the first 3 days of the season as one of my best chances to kill one of my target bucks on one of my main local farms that I've hunted for years and years and years. And usually these are farms where I've had a buck that I've known for multiple years. And, those first couple days before there's any hunting pressure, almost every single year, I'll have a good chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance. Like I'll see him, or he'll have shown up the night before or the night after, or I have a close call, or I kill him, something like that. Those first few days of the season, pre-chaos, are crucial.
Yep.
So I always have, on those places, a plan in place for a great early season hunt. And one of these spots, I can plant food plots, and I always make sure I've got good early season food really tight to this best bedding area, because year in and year out, there's a great chance that first night, if you have good conditions, these bucks usually in mid to late September are pounding that early season food coming right out of the bedding area. And if I haven't screwed it up some way, and if it's not 85 degrees and the wind direction's right, there's a great chance they'll pop out and hit that. So if, all things being best case scenario, that would be what I'm hoping to happen October 1 to maybe 3. I'm not hunting mornings on that property. In most places, well, even if I wasn't hunting there, I would not hunt in the mornings if I didn't have to. This would be like local situation where I'm hunting the spots when this time's right.
Close to home, convenient.
Yeah, yep. Close to home kind of things. This would be different if I was on a traveling hunt, but this is close to home. And so I'm going to, be glassing maybe that morning if I can. For opening day, I'm definitely glassing the night before opening day from afar and trying to watch and see, did they come out? Are they coming out? Did they post up close to the edge in the food plot? Which way do they come in? How are they using the wind? Are they around? In some spots I can see like farther back to the back of the property down, and there's kind of an open swath of land I can see down. So I could sometimes see, are they coming to this little food source or that little food source? So I'm going to try to learn something from those nights prior. And then night number 1, take a stab in at one of those locations, which is this is a edge of a food source kind of location for that first night. And basically how I approach these couple local properties is that I take a targeted strike or two the first night, 2 or 3 of the season. I'll hunt that first night, really hoping to kill something. I'll hunt again the next night if conditions are okay, and then I will make a judgment call about day 3 usually. So if I hunted the first 2 days and just didn't see anything that I'm after, I'll probably pull the plug and not go back in again. If I hunt the second day and I saw the big guy and he came out close and it just didn't come together, or if I saw him off in the distance but he was working his way and I think I can make a play on him, I'll hunt again. But if it's like 2 just total whiffs with nothing positive at all, then I'll say, okay, you know what, let's back out. I don't need to push it here, because these small local Michigan farms could be easily overpressured, and I'm surrounded by lots and lots of hunting pressure. So my take in those situations is to strike hard and fast the first couple of days and hopefully take advantage of that early season pattern before they get bumped off of it from other hunters or me. Once that dies down, once I back out of that, then I'm moving to other places. I'm hunting other spots. Maybe it's other states, maybe it's other properties in Michigan. And I usually don't go back to like my best spots like that again until later in October, around like the 23rd, 24th, 25th, somewhere around there. So what that means for the next, week and a half of early October doesn't mean I stop hunting. I'm doing a couple things at that point. After I took my couple targeted strikes, which are just those evening hunts like I mentioned, because not that you can't succeed in the early season in October, but it can be more difficult in a lot of situations. So I err towards a slightly more conservative approach in the mornings so that I can get a really great hunt in the evenings when it seems like these deer move a little bit more. I've got a better chance of getting in there without spooking anything and having a smart plan to get out in the after dark. So then after October 3rd, let's say I didn't kill anything and I never saw the buck I was after, I'm going to shift into scout mode and travel mode. So I'll go in and check cameras or reposition cameras to do something, because basically all my scouting and work up to that point was all to try to kill that opening night buck. Everything
Yep.
was focused on trying to get that one done. And if that didn't work, now it's like, okay, time to regroup, new plan. So I'll go in and maybe move cameras, or maybe add cameras, or maybe just check them. That usually happens on like immediately after I know I'm done hunting, so the third or the fourth, because this is that point farthest from when I'm guessing I'll start hunting again. I would much rather do my big check or whatever right then versus waiting a week or two, doing it, and then counting on or having to count on starting hunting again 7 days later. And that pressure I just made when I go into that property to dick around, now it's closer to when I want to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go in there and do this kind of short range, quick scouting. And that's going to tell me one of two things. If I go in there and check cameras and it tells me that there's activity somewhere I wasn't aware of and that I should hunt, then I will hunt. I'll go in there and get after it. But if it's not, if it's how it oftentimes goes to these properties, it's kind of dead. There was probably some late September stuff. There was hopefully something, early October maybe. But if it didn't happen after that, well, then I've got to figure out what's next. So There's the scouting, and then there's now my hunting season continues. And I lots of times will travel to another nearby state for a local hunt, and I like to try to get that early still too. And I found I've done this many years where I'd hunt the first couple days in Michigan hoping to kill one of those target bucks. And then if it doesn't pan out, I always try to get to my kind of secondary state before the end of that first week, because I feel like, especially some of these states where it's slightly lower pressure, you can still have that kind of beginning of the season halo effect last a little bit longer.
Agreed.
So I'll head down to Iowa on the 4th or the 5th, or I'll head to Ohio and hunt the 6th and the 7th or whatever. And you can still get that early season, pre too much hunting pressure opportunity. So I'll do that kind of thing and do a similar type of hunt. Hunting some kind of bed to food pattern. And I'll be, not mega aggressive, but I will try to be like in a kill spot. It's a kill hunt.
Yep.
And hopefully you have, enough history or information from whatever kind of scouting you did that year to put you in a place to succeed. And a lot of my hunting now, almost all of my hunting is, like you said earlier, hang and hunt. So I'm going there with a saddle and climbing sticks.
Yep.
And so I'll go in there and hunt, night number 1 on a food source right inside like a little staging area. And then I'm going to hopefully be in a spot where I can see something and then adjust. So the perfect situation is that I get in there, I can see the food source, but I can also see what's happening in the cover around me, and I can learn something. I can see if a buck does come out, or I can see where all the deer are coming out, or something that allows me to then make an adjustment. But I'm very, very much an observe and adjust hunter now versus putting up a stand in August and that being like, oh, well, that's where I hunt with the west wind.
Yep.
I don't do that anymore. Now it's set up somewhere that makes sense, then observe what did the deer do. Okay, now I'm moving tomorrow. How do I move based on that adjustment, based on the changing conditions? I'm at that time of year, it's almost always going to be something like a staging area between bedding area and food source, unless like some little isolated apple tree back in the cover that's tight to the bedding or something that's just like a slam dunk and it requires you to get really aggressive and dive in there. But I'm not going to do that unless there's a really, really strong reason to do that.
Okay.
Once I've done a hunt like that, now we're in like the second week of October. In most years, this is when I am going to shift to just observe, scout from afar, and hunt does, or hunt like some random public land just for fun and just to like try new things. Like sometimes I'll go hunt some public land close to my house where I've not invested a lot of time scouting or work or anything like that. It's just like, hey, I want to keep hunting. I can hunt. It's the weekend of the 12th. I can get out there and hunt, and it'd be fun, and I'll shoot a doe, and who knows? I'll try this. Maybe I'll try being really aggressive and dive into the spot that looks like a bedding area. And if I blow it up, who cares? I'm not planning on hunting here again, so I'll just learn and see what happens. I think that's a really good way to spend some of those middle of October days if you're hunting local and you're not traveling and you've got some time. It's a great way to get out there and hunt and grow, but not blow up your main spots. If you just have like a small farm or two, like I have, if you've got, 800 acres of primo managed land, maybe you can bounce around and hunt good spots the whole damn month. But I can't. So at a super high level, I guess
Yep.
that's what that time period looks like.
And to kind of go back to our data points in the notes, you kind of hit the nail on the head of something that happened to me last year. And I hunted the first 3 days of October in Michigan. And then Casey and I went to Ohio the 5th, 6th, 7th in that time frame. And exactly what you just said happened. Like, I had two of my shooters show up on the 2nd. I was in a different stand when they showed up. They showed up on cell cam, so I kind of picked wrong that night. But then when we went down to Ohio, there was like a 5-day stretch, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, somewhere right in there, that was off the chain. And it was, we were seeing all of our shooters in daylight on field edges, really. I mean, we were kind of, the way Casey likes to hunt, and we like to approach things early, is just kind of sit from afar and then react, like you were talking. So we were kind of sitting from afar, and it was the first night, like, a really good 3-year-old came out, and I really tried to get him to indulge and, like, let's get the season started. But he's like, no, we got a lot of season left. But like, those data points, you can kind of go into this next year, if you have those, looking at like, okay, I can plan out a little more efficiently probably just on what happened last year, because I would forget that. I have a terrible brain, like, for remembering things. So I'd forget that. But no, that's great info, and kind of in how I've approached things the last couple years. A lot like you, I would set up stands preseason, and these are the ones I was going to hunt. I've really adopted the run and gun method the last couple years, and it's made things more fun, to be honest with you. So it's cool to hear you say all that stuff. Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. And actually, wanting to come on and chat. Hopefully we can do this again, maybe during season stuff. I, respect you a lot. I've looked up to you for the last couple years, and you got me into podcasting. So thank you very much for all that. I think I told you that before, but
thank you.
I want to echo that again, man. So thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, you were so welcome. It was fun. I enjoyed it, and hope some of the stuff can help folks.
Yeah, definitely. Now, if you have if anybody wants to look at what you're doing, or read what you got going on, or watch anything, where would you direct them to go?
Yeah, so we've kind of relaunched Wired to Hunt in a big way. We've got a whole slew of writers writing daily articles. We've got a new series of educational videos on YouTube. We've got 3 podcasts an episode coming out every week now in the hunting season. So they can basically find all of that at themeateater.com/wired. So go to the Meat Eater website /wired, and that'll take you to like the Wired to Hunt homepage where all this stuff is. You can also just search for Wired to Hunt on whatever it is you're doing, and you'll find us there. YouTube, Instagram, iTunes, Spotify, whatever. But we're pumping it out. Lots and lots of stuff for diehard deer hunters. So hopefully there's something there for everyone.
Good stuff, man. Well, thank you very much again, and good luck this fall.
Thank you. You too.
And there you have it, another awesome episode. Mark Kenyon, thank you very much for coming on, man. It's greatly appreciated. Hopefully we can carve out some time this fall that we can get back on and do that again. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. I do want to say thank you guys again for all the support, all the downloads. It's tremendous, the amount of feedback I'm getting right now and the engagement from the podcast. If you guys could do me a favor and go to iTunes, there's a 5-star there. If you scroll down, you click on the Fall Podcast, scroll all the way down. And if you're on your phone, and there's a 5-star, click the 5-star. That'd be great. And also, if you want to leave a written review, that'd be greatly appreciated as well. So thank you guys very much. And don't forget, we'll be right here next week on the Fall Podcast.